How many of you had to borrow from your parents for your mortgage? So I just closed on my very first property in Toronto and was looking for somewhere quieter to settle away from the downtown ruckus. Currently single, ultimately settled on a townhouse for $800,000 in the Swansea Hyde Park area. Although I make a very comfortable six-figure living and had roughly $180K saved up with a combination of cash in the bank, TFSAs, and RRSPs. My mortgage advisor was only able to get me around $550,000 3-year fixed. Even then, I was still short almost $100,000. This includes miscellaneous fees such as lawyer fees, transfer closing fees, etc. I am just wondering, how common is it to borrow from your parents for new home buyers? I've rarely if ever relied on them regarding borrowing money or needed their help with my financial situation since I make a good income. But I am definitely one of the lucky ones where my parents are extremely generous when it comes to helping me out when needed. Is there any shame in asking to borrow from them? Is there any shame in asking to borrow from them? Only you can answer that. In the past, I've needed loans from my parents. No questions asked. Pay us back when you can. I have a great relationship with my parents. My wife and I bought our first place entirely on our own, which meant we only put 5 down. We don't know a single homeowner our age who bought without money from their parents. I think we'll be alright, but these rate hikes are absolutely fucking us, while all our friends from rich families are doing fine because they didn't have to borrow as much. Thankfully, last night my friend mother is an executive at one of the most powerful companies in the country, married to a trust fund kid, assured me that things are going to improve because Pluto is moving into Aquarius. It's surprising how so few comments in the thread make the distinction between borrowing a loan versus receiving a gift from parents. How many of you are expected to pay back the money? My parents are always willing to help me out with money. My dad's argument is he'd rather see me spend my inheritance while he's still alive to see it than use it while he's gone. I've only taken them up on it once, and that was to buy a new car when I had a kid. Zero financing was better than the 5.5 I was being offered. We bought our first house with 5 down, no help from parents. Sold 2 years later and the increased value gave us a 20 down on the next one. This market is absurd. No, I never wanted to be beholden to my parents. They would have dictated where I lived, etc. I made my own choices and earned my own way. I hate this sometimes. People making bank and having access to loans from parents to access housing, meanwhile I'm the loaning bank for my parents since I'm 18. Just feels like I wasn't born in the right family and that it's all it needs for me to not be able to afford ever buying a home. Just to be clear, I don't hate the people in the sub, wealthy or not, I just hate that it's all I see and that it constantly reminds me how fucked I was from the start. Y'all are lucky, take advantage of it and keep it in mind. Imagine having parents with money to lend, person shrugging, fair skin. The current economic situation and housing market are absolutely rigged against first-time home buyers. It's impossible for most people to pay Toronto rent and save for a down payment and qualify for the size mortgage one needs to buy a home here. It's not a moral failing to need help, and it's okay to take it if you have access to it. It's also okay to be mad about the situation that we find ourselves in, whether or not you personally have access to help. People who work hard should be able to access decent housing, but the rental market and the housing market are both a mess for everyone. Is there any shame in asking to borrow from them? Whether or not your parents help you depends entirely on their finances and your relationship with them. Whether or not other people didn't get help from their parents shouldn't make a difference to your parents' decision. Shame shouldn't be a part of this. Seems like you're asking this question more about your own feelings of guilt failure. If you are lucky enough to have that kind of parental support, you don't need to feel guilty. Just recognize your privilege and feel grateful. I bought my first apartment 15 years ago or so with no help from my parents because it only cost $250K at the time. That same place would sell for 550, 580K now. It's absurd, and my child is fucked if he wants to stay in the GVA. No shame. Use what you can to get ahead. We all cry nepotism and privilege, but realistically, if the right opportunity to help your own children presents itself, we would all jump on it. Your parents achieved the Canadian dream and are now able to share their wealth across the next generation. Good for them, and I hope they can retire happy. What sucks is the have-not and have groups will become significantly more apparent in the future. I don't think there's shame. I had 5 down saved for my starter condo. My mom kicked in about 20 to make the mortgage payment manageable. I'm Chinese and it's almost a cultural norm for parents to do this. I'm not ashamed, but I recognize my privilege and I don't pretend home ownership in my 20s was feasible for me without her, or act like it just takes hard work and frugality. To get into the Toronto market without help is borderline impossible, and commend those who do it. It's not a matter of generosity if your parents gift you 100K for a down payment help or closing costs, it's literally financial privilege. Many people's parents would probably love to be so generous, but unless they have privileged means, it's simply not possible. Just something to keep in mind with conversations like this. We bought our first home $890,000 in 2021. Zero help from parents, but we are dinks. Honestly, having no financial support from parents in this day and age sucks, even if you make good money. Take advantage, they won the generational lottery. My parents helped, sort of. They were sneaky about it. My mom was a minister, which came with a rectory. They purchased a retirement home and I rented it from them until mom was ready to retire. Well, eventually I decided to buy it from them. I'd been saving up and had almost enough for the down payment. When I told them, they said, "Hey, remember all that rent money you've been paying to us?" Well, we haven't spent it. We've been putting it in a separate account and now we're giving it all back to you. How do you repay them the 100K while also making your mortgage payments? Who fuck is buying over $500,000 property and asking their parents for money? My lord, you guys must have it good. I worked for a young guy who owned 2 houses years back. One time my paycheck bounced and he apologized, adding that his dad forgot to transfer the money to his business account. Lots of lucky people around, it's life. We were short 15K, so we borrowed that, but honestly we probably could have waited and saved a few months, but we found a house we really liked, so just pull the trigger on that. It honestly depends when you bought sold. My place almost doubled in the 6 years I owned it. That said, it was quite difficult to move up the property ladder because percentage increases widen gaps. For example, $300,000 townhouse or $500,000 detached. The gap is $200,000, market goes up 10, $330,000 townhouse, $550,000 detached, the gap also grew 10 to $220,000. We bought the dip earlier this year as we felt under the current leadership in this country, this may be the only time we were going to be able to afford a larger place. We are well within the top 10 of income earners in Canada. Shame? We talking shame? Michael Dell, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. All borrowed money from their parents. No shame. I don't think there is any shame whether they help with down payment or buy it outright for you. Different parents have different means of helping their children, and if you hear any negatives, it's probably jealousy coming from someone who didn't get any support. Where did you find a townhouse in Swansea High Park for $800K? This is exactly why prices won't come down. Buyers will do ridiculous things to pay the only understood it is the buyers that set the price. Offer $700K. Done. No shame with these interest rates. A lot of folks in this thread talking about 5 down probably did it in a low interest environment where they could actually get a mortgage for 95% of the value of the house that also wasn't highly priced at the time. If you do feel any shame, just set up a repayment plan to them.